we've got somebody in the chat right now. We're just 3 minutes behind our schedule, so we're not too bad. But let's make this work. Okay, here we go. Mandi, right. How you doing? You with us, Mandi?
Hello.
Oh, there you go. Cool. Let me do one thing. We're throwing in for every $100 we raise. We're filling the room with balloons. They're harder to see, but the closer they get, the brighter they get. And by the end of the day, it's probably going to be my face in some kind of strange circus. 3 o'clock. We got about 2 hours. We're going to have to put some work in here. Get rid of the pie to the face, and get rocking and rolling. All right, so we're joined now. Sometimes, we talk about this, and some things hit closer to home sometimes. And this is Mandi, my cousin, member of the family, and I brought her in. I put for your tag, Mandi, advocate for cancer research, and because I think it's probably where we're at right now. But let's kind of stop and just pause and say, okay, so Mandi's here. Why? Like, let's talk about your story and what happened and what went on. I know it's not easy, and it's not going to be easy for me either. So I will let you do the talking here.
Well, great, thanks. So my son, Kingston, was diagnosed with a type of brain cancer called medulloblastoma when he was 5.5 in July of 2020. So it initially started out with him telling us that he had headaches, and we would just give him Tylenol, didn't really think much of it. After a couple weeks, we took him to the pediatrician. They told us that since it was the summertime, he was outside all day playing, to give him some Gatorade. He was probably dehydrated. So we did that for a couple days. That was like a Wednesday or a Thursday. Over the weekend, he still kept complaining. So the next Monday, I called the pediatrician and told them that it wasn't getting better. He was still complaining. So they got us in the next day, squeezed us in for a MRI. And we went to the MRI. They told us it took forever. And we were at one of Cincinnati Children's satellite hospitals when they did the MRI. After they told us that they found something, they took us to the ER there, where we waited for an ambulance to transport us downtown to the base hospital, where we would meet with the neurosurgeons and everybody. By the time we made it down to base, and got situated in the PICU. He had to be in the PICU initially because the headaches were being caused by hydrocephalus, because where his tumor was in the base of his brain, it wouldn't allow his brain fluid to filter through his nervous system. So he had to be on hydrocephalus watch overnight, where they would basically come in and check him every hour. So he spent the night in the PICU. The next day, we met with neurosurgery at 8 a.m. They had a room already ready for him. They took him right away that morning, did surgery. It was, I want to say, 8 hours long with surgery. They were able to get the whole tumor. He only had one tumor. He didn't have any metastases or anything like that, which was good. They said the tumor was about the size of a plum. So they got the whole tumor. They had to do craniotomy, laminectomy, take part of his vertebrae, cut into his skull, everything to get into it. So it was a pretty extensive surgery. And then after his surgery, he had a drain to help drain because of the hydrocephalus. And he had that for a couple weeks until they could put a permanent shunt in where it would drain down into his abdomen. Shortly after his surgery, he developed posterior fossa syndrome, which is becoming more common in kids with medullo. And basically, he couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't feed himself, couldn't do anything. And that was probably within 2 days after surgery, all of that developed. So he spent a couple more days in the PICU, and then they moved us down to the neuro floor. until they actually put his shunt in. And then they moved us to inpatient rehab, where he would go to rehab twice a day. And he was, and basically once we moved to the neuro floor, they started with rehab. So he was in rehab pretty much immediately. His case of posterior fossa syndrome wasn't as severe as a lot of kids. He was talking within 2 weeks, back to speaking full sentences and everything. And a lot of kids that have posterior fossa syndrome don't talk or walk for year afterwards. They lose like all ability to do anything for themselves. So he was really lucky in that case. We ended up staying in the hospital inpatient for 49 days. After about 40-ish days, they transferred us up to one of their base hospitals that has their proton radiation. So that way we could still be inpatient and they wouldn't have to transport us back and forth. So we were inpatient there. He was getting proton radiation every day. He did that for 30 days. And he was released in the middle of that. So every morning we would have to come back to the hospital for his radiation. And since he was so young and you have to stay still for radiation, he had to be sedated 5 days a week for it. So it wasn't just like a in and out procedure. It was 2 or 3 hours long every day. So he got 30 rounds of radiation. And after that, he had about a month off. And then he started chemo. And the kind of, so medulloblastoma has 4 subtypes. And the kind that he had was the most aggressive, and it had a gene amplification that made it even more aggressive. So we chose to do high risk radiation and chemo to make sure we got everything. So once he started chemo, he would be inpatient for 4 days to get his medicine, and then we would be released. And then we would come back once a week. They would do blood draws to make sure his counts were okay. And he would get an extra dose of chemo on like day 7 or 10 or something like that. So it was constant doctor's appointments every week for that also. And he was also receiving out PT, OT, and speech. So that was twice a week to go for that. And I tried my best to get him to have everything so we could do 1 trip a day for everything, but sometimes it didn't work out. But we're lucky that we were close enough that it wasn't really a big deal. If we had to go a long distance to multiple hospitals multiple times a week. Yep. So he had 6 rounds of chemo. So from November through April, he was in at least once a week. Sometimes he was in longer if he developed a fever when his counts were 0. So he was neutropenic, and he would have to stay until his counts would go above 250, which sometimes took 2 weeks. So in addition to his week of chemo that he was inpatient, he would be in for longer. So April was his last chemo. And then he was done with treatment, and they determined he had no evidence of disease as of April 2021. After that, he had every 3 months, he would get an MRI just to make sure everything was still clear. Still clean. On his 6-month MRI, they would do brain and spine. So they found a spot on his liver on his 6-month MRI. And they scheduled him for an abdominal MRI just to make sure. They said that it's probably just something like a fatty liver left over from surgery or something, or his chemo or something like that. So they scheduled it for like 3 weeks out. By the time we got in for his abdominal MRI, he had multiple metastases throughout his abdominal cavity and pleural cavity. And so what they think had happened was, in between radiation and chemo somewhere, some tumor cells traveled from his shunt through his abdomen and were dispersed in his spinal fluid that drained from that. And that's extremely rare.
Yeah.
So we discussed a game plan, and it was hard because 30% of kids that have medulla relapse. And once they relapse, it's very, very rare for them to fully be cured. There aren't really many protocols out there that are like solidified as to curing it. Everything is just research based. And especially with his relapse, there was hardly anything that they knew that they could try. And they even biopsied part of it to be sure that it was medulloblastoma, just so that way they weren't dealing with a secondary cancer, which is common in kids that get chemo and radiation. So once we decided on a protocol to try, they basically told us that it was not going to cure him. It was just going to buy us time. So we decided on a protocol, and it was an oral chemo protocol that we could do at home. He took pills every day. And we really didn't have to go back to the hospital for much. It was just blood work once every 2 weeks. And then they gave him an infusion that was like 2 hours long. So it wasn't, and that was one of the things that we were very adamant about, was that we didn't want him to spend lots of time in the hospital.
Yeah.
So around, I want to say February or March, we had another scan and they determined that it was still progressing. So we got him off of that protocol, and we had already lessened some of the medicine a little bit at that time, just because his counts weren't recovering. So we were already doing some medicines at 75%. And so it wasn't really advantageous to keep doing that protocol. So as a last ditch effort, we tried this drug called Lutathera. And basically what it is it's a injectable radiation that targets certain cells that he had for his tumor. He did that at the end of March, but at that point it was already too much. We did notice some differences because he was like jaundice and stuff because of the tumors on his liver were so big.
Right.
And about a week after his Lutathera, he did start looking better. So we were hopeful. But then he just developed ascites, and it was like too much fluid in his abdomen. And then he unfortunately passed away April 29th of this year. So he had a 1.5 year battle.
That is one of the most difficult stories to hear. And I appreciate you sharing it, because I know how hard it is. And nobody should ever have to go through what you or Kingston went through. And it's heartbreaking. And I'm working here. It's everybody's touched in some way. Their family, friends, someone they know has cancer, and it's just so much harder with children. And it's one of the key reasons we started this whole thing. That's why we do this every year. And, Mandi, you guys weren't patients at St. Jude. You didn't use the services of St. Jude. But, like, they have research going on right now with medulloblastoma. They have a clinical trial going on right now. And all this money that we're trying to raise and put together here is to help kids like Kingston and people like Mandi to be able to not have to be here in a place that makes us unhappy, to have a little bit more fun, a little bit more smiles and all that. So, Mandi, I know it's hard, and I appreciate you sharing your story. It's close. It means
No problem. Because when he relapsed, I actually went to the website that has all of the trials out right now. and went through each and every one of them and tried to see if he qualified, because there's all kinds of parameters that you have to meet to qualify. Yep. So I picked out every single one that I thought he would qualify and discussed it with his doctors. And we talked about a whole bunch of different options. And so it's good that there's options out there for parents to be able to put their kids in trials to help other kids.
Yep. That's exactly it. That's all we can do is keep working to get there. And hopefully one day, things like this will help other people avoid this, and we can be the people that help break ground to save others. It's one of the few things we can take away. Mandi, universally, the folks watching, sending prayers and love and everything. Sorry for your loss, and remember Kingston. Keep him. We'll keep him in our heart. I know you will. And the good news is you're still a mom to a bunch of kids, and they're great kids, and you get to still have the joy of parenting. You never make up for the loss. Nothing ever fills that hole, and you know that. But family, friends, and trying to do good for in the world is what we get. So I just want to thank you, Mandi, so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's hard and it's brave, but it's something that we want to do so people can really see and understand why we do this and what it means to the people that are out there and suffering and having a hard time. So, Riz, I don't know if you have anything to say.
Just thank you for sharing. I know that can't be easy. It's funny, as you were talking, I have a 17-year-old son. He just walked by my window here. I just thought about what it would be like to go through that. And I can't even imagine.
All right, Mandi, I thank you. I'll save this. I'll share it with the family so they can see as well, and they can make fun of me and Riz.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
That's who we are, right?
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's
Danielle.
And to get through it the way you have, and having other kids, like, I can't imagine how your life just like stops. And it's like you talked about, like, you go to the doctor one day and then the next day he's having, like, that's unbelievable that he can that it goes like that. But that's
and
what
you never
does.
expect it to happen to you. Like, that's the last thing in your mind when you're taking your kid to an MRI.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, Mandi, thank you. We're gonna move. We're gonna go to try to do some silly stuff. I don't know how you go to fill in a room with balloons and stuff like that, but we're gonna try. I appreciate you again to bearing your soul and bringing your heart, and look forward to seeing you soon. Okay.
No problem. Thank you guys for doing what you're doing.
All right. Thanks, Mandi.
Thanks.
Mandi.
All right.
That's
I need a minute.
That's why we're here. That's why we're doing it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks,
Mandi.
Mandi.
All right. That's exactly right. That's why we do it. And I'm gonna need to grab a little something here.
Just the idea of, we're both dads, and a lot of the people that are playing along with us today have kids, and our kids are older now, but just the thought of
GE 35150, thank you. Anonymous 20, thank you. Lost Cause 64. For Mojo, Dave Blaylock, he passed on December 25th, 2022 from December 5th, 2022 from colon cancer. He was a great friend in person, the life of the party and everyone's friend, unless you hurt someone that didn't want to be hurt. One of the Mojo brothers and co-founder of the Holy Order of the Knights of Mojo. Hokum on Facebook. Lost Cause 64. Thanks for the $100 donation there, guys. 1714 bills by a billion. Dave Griffiths 6969. Evan Schnautman. Danielle, you're the sweetest. Thank you so much. In memory of Kingston, $500 donation. That's your special person. In many ways. Nick Freeze, it's got to be Freeze, $100 as well. Thank you all for donating. And look, Jesse makes a great point talking about how St. Jude covers expenses for families. And he doesn't know that many people know that they cover everything. They cover the full garbanzo.
They do everything.
And families come
just the
in.
medical part, but like taking care of the family, the transportation that's needed, the home care that's needed when the kids at home going through whatever, like what Kingston did, or that they do take care of all of that. It's not like your medical insurance where they're just paying your bill, and they wait a year and a half to pay for it. They're there every step of the way for every single thing that they do. And that's part of why we are here representing St. Jude's, because that's something that's, they're going above and beyond what most places would do. And that's why Chris got turned on to it. The more research I did on it, there are definitely other organizations that do it as well. But St. Jude's is sort of out there, waving the flag and leading the charge against all these childhood cancers. They do research projects. As Mandi noted, you get your kid into a trial, and unfortunately hers didn't end positively, but because of what they've done and the funding and the research that's going on, maybe the next kid does get through it okay.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here.